Phosphor Dot friends, Earl at thelogbook.com, back on the Atari 2600, but this time it's the Atari 2600 with the Starpath Supercharger. The Supercharger was a gadget that you could plug into the cartridge slot of the Atari 2600, and it added on some extra memory, just some extra processing capability, and you fed programs into the Supercharger via cassette tape that you would plug in from basically the audio out of one of those big chunky brick cassette recorders, and feed that via a wire into the Supercharger. It would load the cassette after you turned on the machine. And this is the kind of game that we got out of this deal. This is Killer Satellites. And in a way, I think we can all obviously see that this is an attempt to crash into things. No, it's an attempt to do a better version of Defender. Than what Atari had already produced by then. I'm not sure we have played Atari's Defender, and we should at some point. Well, that's one way to do it. It's just not the recommended procedure. It's not the textbook procedure. If we're dealing with the aliens, it's crashing into them. I need to stop doing that. The idea behind the Supercharger and its software library was that it would allow for better games, although how much better is kind of a matter of opinion, because graphically this is only a kind of a minor improvement. Just a minor improvement on what the 2600 could already do. Now it's blissfully flicker-free. if there is an unexplored technological cul-de-sac that the supercharger represented, oh, I guess my guns heated up too much. They seized up and I couldn't fire any further. The improvement over what the 2600 was already capable of was kind of marginal with the supercharger. If there is a lost opportunity that the supercharger represents, I think it is this. The games for the supercharger were distributed on cassette, but only by Starpath. Only Starpath ever released supercharger games. Cassette tapes were a readily available commodity that you could order and have duplicated in great numbers, as opposed to cartridges, which, for everyone who made cartridge games for the 2600, that was a custom expense. In many cases, they had to create their own casings, they had to create their own circuit boards, and so on. The cassette distribution system, as antiquated as it may seem to us now, in an age where no one even remembers why the save icon is a floppy disk, that really could have leveled the playing field in a lot of ways, except it happened far too late. If the supercharger had come out in 81, say if Activision had come out with the supercharger and said, hey, we're doing games on cassette now, I think that would have significantly changed the playing field, because you would have had some of the ancillary players coming in and doing third-party software for the 2600 wouldn't have had the brutal financial outlay required to create cartridges. They would have just done cassettes. How proprietary this information was, how close Starpath, formerly known as Arcadia, was keeping that information, that I have no idea. So I have no idea how realistic the scenario is that I'm talking about, this kind of what-if scenario. But while the additional capabilities of the supercharger itself were not that huge an improvement on the 2600. I mean, it didn't turn it into, the 5200. It didn't turn it into ColecoVision. It was just 2600, but slightly better. I think the great untapped potential of the supercharger was actually software distribution on cassette.